Welcome back to How to Craft Fair. This is episode 9 in the How to Become a Craft Fair Organizer series. Today we're going to be talking about additional activities for your event. And in this episode, I'll show you several entertaining elements that you can have at your craft fair that are sure to elevate the experience for visitors beyond what's already being showcased by your vendors. Not only will I give you ideas on different kinds of activities, but I'm also going to show you how to find them, secure their placement for the event, and then set them up for success. So before we jump in, I just want to make a quick side note and let you know that one of the easiest ways that you can attract each of these activities is to hop onto Facebook, either in groups or on your page as you've built it up, and make in search of posts. So ISO, and that can be one way to generate a lot of interest in acquiring these types of activities. So maybe food truck vendors happen to see them or whoever. So that's one easy way to attract all of the following activities that we're going to talk about. But as we run through each one, I'll show you additional tips on how to reach out and attract these types of activities. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first 3 activities are arguably the most challenging to plan or require some additional coordination between yourself and the facility in order to set these activities up for success. So since they require a little bit of special attention, let's go ahead and start with these 3 activities first. And the first one that we're going to talk about is food trucks. So you should follow these steps to successfully secure a food truck for your craft fair and provide your guests with a unique and delicious dining experience. My first tip is before you do anything, be sure to check with the facility and, if necessary, the town or the city that you're holding your event in, just to be sure that food trucks are allowed at the event in the first place. Okay, so sometimes there's some local restrictions or certain hoops that you have to jump through. You're also going to need to determine if there are any restrictions on what can be sold at the event. So sometimes a venue will have exclusive rights. Let's say, for example, beverage sales. Some facilities will basically control beverage sales, and you can have food vendors, but no beverages, no drinks or anything can be sold at the event. Finally, you want to communicate with the facility itself to verify whether or not food truck operators are subject to any additional fees. So sometimes this can happen as well as a way for the venue to kind of like capitalize on food that's being sold at the event. So you just want to make sure that you're on the same page with the facility and any additional fees that might come for those food vendors. Okay, the second step is to do some research. So look for food trucks in your area that cater to events. You can also search online, check social media, ask for recommendations from friends, or even seek them out in person. So there's a lot of different ways that you can work to acquire a food truck vendor. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, of course, Facebook groups and things like that are great posts, but sometimes, checking them out in person is a great way to see them because, you actually get to try their products and things like that. So that's a great way to acquire a food truck for your event. Now, your third step is to contact the food truck owners. So you want to reach out to the food truck owners to inquire about their availability for your event date, the type of food that they serve or the menu that they'd be able to build out for your event. Pricing is also great, and any special requirements that they might have. So, electrical hookup, or if, they need to use a generator, and, whether they can be at a certain area. So these are the questions that you'd want to reach out to the food truck owners about. Fourth step is to check licenses and permits. So this is a very, very important step, especially for food trucks, since you're dealing with, food being consumed and all that. So you want to just ensure that the food truck you choose has all the necessary licenses and permits to operate where the craft fair is being held. Fifth step goes into a little bit more detail on something we already touched on, but that's to review the menu options. Discuss the menu options with the food truck owner to ensure that they offer a variety of dishes that will suit the preference of your guests. Now, you want to be careful about overly messy dishes that might be troublesome for a craft fair where people are near or even handling vendors' products. Okay, so that's a detail that you really want to work out with the food truck owner is that you want to have some pretty easy, like grab and go bites that are easy to consume when people are walking around a craft fair. Okay, so that's definitely just something to keep in the back of your mind. Now, you don't have to, exclusively have very easily to consume food, but you want to at least have several of those options so that it helps just to kind of keep things tidy throughout the craft fair. The sixth step is to book in advance. This is very important with food trucks. They can get booked up pretty early, especially during peak season, sometimes literally like up to a year in advance. So once you have your date booked for your event and you decide that, yes, I want to have food trucks, you've checked with the facility that food trucks are allowed, all that stuff, this is one of the very first things that you want to work on, okay? Because you will need to book well in advance to secure their services for your event date. Remember that food trucks are a big selling point for a craft fair too. So the sooner that you book a food truck, the earlier that you can advertise that they're a part of your event. So it helps with that marketing aspect of your show as well. So that's another reason why you want to secure those pretty early. Seventh step is to coordinate logistics. So you want to work with the food truck owner to coordinate logistics such as the event location, the setup details, the power source requirements that they have, and any other specific arrangements needed for the food truck to operate smoothly at your event. Being organized from the start will help keep you in good graces with the food truck owner because they want to know these things far in advance so that they can kind of plan out their end, what their day is going to look like, and everything that they need to bring. Be sure to provide ample room for the food truck as well as an area for guests to enjoy their meals. Okay, so you have to have like a little seating area, maybe some bar top tables, things like that, where people don't necessarily have to be sitting, but they can kind of stand and eat their meals. A lot of people like that at a craft fair, but just have a mix, okay, have a variety. And you want to just be sure that there is nice spacing because they need that bonus room, all right? So people will congregate in this area, and you just want to plan out a good location at your show where they're visible to everybody so that they're getting good foot traffic, but yet they have all the space that they need in order to not get really congested. All right, so that about does it for food trucks. Now let's move on to another activity that you can have, and that is mobile boutique shopping trucks. So, not nearly as common as food trucks, mobile boutique shopping trucks are harder to find, but they can be a tremendous feature of your craft fair that is sure to draw attention to your event and make it a more memorable experience for your guests. Now, some of the best ways to find a mobile boutique is through Google searches, Facebook searches, and by spotting them at other events in your area. So don't feel weird about approaching a boutique owner at another event, even if it's another craft fair, about expressing interest in having them at your show. They're going to be likely pretty glad to hear from you. Just keep the conversation brief so that you're not forcing them to miss out on opportunities with customers at the event that they're currently intending. Okay, so that's a big no-no. Whenever you're looking to kind of recruit something interesting for your show, try to keep it brief, okay? Because they're there to sell at that event, okay? And you don't want to rob them of those opportunities with customers. But one thing that you can do is just introduce yourself really quick. Exchange business cards is always great, and promise to follow up with them later. Okay, so that's all that's really needed. It's not a big deal, but be sure to reach back out to them, tell them about your event, how you think that it would be mutually beneficial. Okay, so how you think that they would take your event to the next level and what you can offer to them. All right, so just make sure to keep everybody in mind and keep it brief. If that interaction goes smoothly, then what you can discuss with them in the future, it's going to be a similar conversation to what you'd have with the food truck operators, okay? So confirm any kind of licensing or permits that are needed, what the truck will feature, and any accommodations needed. Give them proper space at the venue, book them well in advance, and be sure to promote their truck once they are secured for your event. Okay, so obviously those are all crucial steps, and again, similar to how you'd handle the food truck operators. Now, the next activity that we're going to discuss is live music. Unlike food trucks and mobile boutiques, there isn't as much pressure on you as the organizer to secure them for your event well before the show. While there are benefits to booking your live musician in advance, such as being able to advertise that they're part of your event, that marketing aspect that we touched on before, their availability is generally more open than the food and boutique trucks. So basically, you might be able to secure one leading up to the event if, you decide that you want this kind of like at the last minute. But just consider those benefits of being able to advertise them as a fun aspect of your show. So again, the earlier, the better. So be sure to consider the placement of their staging setup. This is very important. You will have to make a decision on whether you feature them up front near an entrance, putting a spotlight on an additional activity, or whether you feel it's best to place them towards the back of the venue where they can possibly act as a magnet to help draw guests deeper into your event. Okay, so there's kind of pros and cons on each of those placements, but you also need to consider their proximity to other activities. Music obviously can be loud. They're probably going to have some sort of PA system to project the music a little bit, and spacing is very important when it comes to this. There should be ample room for guests to congregate and enjoy the music. And seating and bar top style tables are another great addition for this space. But you also have to be considerate of your vendors, okay? So just remember that you are primarily organizing a craft fair, right? So at the end of the day, your vendors, I don't want to say they're more important, okay, but they are a very crucial aspect of this event, and they need to be able to communicate clearly with shoppers all day long. So you just have to keep that in mind with spacing. So you got to find a little bit of a balance between having a live musician being, I don't want to say like a focal point, but very visible at the show in order to, make it a highlight of the event. But you can't have them directly on top of a vendor where they're not going to be able to hear anything all day. Okay, so there is a balance there. Just be able to, look at your map and find a great spot for them at the show. So again, this is another activity where you should coordinate with the facility staff and the musician on any electrical needs or any other info that should be agreed upon in advance before the show. So again, this is the third of the 3 activities that are going to require you to communicate quite a bit with the facility staff just to make sure that everybody's on the same page and prepared well before the show. And then finally, kind of stating the obvious here, but just be sure to hire a musician whose set list and style will complement the vibe of your event and attract guests whose interests mesh well with your show. Okay, so a lot of times craft fairs will feature some sort of acoustic element, maybe something kind of softer, not as, rowdy and crazy. But just obviously try to match the vibe of the musician to who you think the demographic of your guests is mostly going to be, and obviously taking your vendors in account as well. Okay, so now let's move on to music playlists. So if you're unable to secure a live musician or you're just not interested in having that at your event, you should definitely have a music playlist playing during the course of your event. So the first thing that you want to do is to work with the facility staff during contract negotiations to determine if music can be played throughout the whole venue through some sort of supported sound system. Be sure to understand if it will be your responsibility to create and broadcast your own playlist over the PA system, or if they have their own sound system that can perhaps just broadcast an appropriate radio station in your area. And that would basically eliminate the need for you to create and manage a playlist yourself. If you will be creating your own playlist, get clear communication on how your device will connect to the sound system so that you're prepared the day of the event. When you're building your own playlist, you don't ever want to rely off of someone else's pre-made playlist. This is pretty important because you want to be absolutely sure that you know what every single song is on this playlist so that something absolutely obnoxious doesn't pop up on it. And again, like we mentioned with the live musician earlier, you want to pick songs that fit the theme of your event and what you think the majority of the demographic of vendors and visitors will enjoy. When building out a playlist, I recommend crossing over into multiple decades worth of music so that just about anybody can relate. So try not to get super, super specific so that, somebody isn't basically irritated by what's playing all day. Kind of mix it up a little bit. But if you have a themed event, so let's say, for example, if you're doing a craft fair that's, maybe Halloween or trick or treat based, or you have one during, kind of like the Christmas holidays or whatever, this is a great opportunity to enhance that theme by incorporating music that's associated with those times of year, holidays, or themes. Remember that taking the time to build your own playlist now is going to pay off at future events when you've already had a playlist pretty much built out and you can enjoy them from year to year, make little additions and edits, but it's something that's already built up. So you do it the first year and you're pretty much set. Now, this is a good time to make a little bit of a side note and say that you should always check with the facility staff if their PA system gives you the opportunity to make announcements with a microphone. So this could come in handy throughout the day to assist with a raffle. Maybe you have instructions for vendors on their load in and their load out, lost items throughout the day. Maybe you have craft workshops or any other special announcements. So this is definitely an important thing to check with the facility staff if you are capable of making announcements during the show. Okay, now for the following activities, I'm going to roll them into one group because for the most part, they're handled in a similar manner from one another. So think about caricature artists, a face painter, a henna artist, a photo booth, and even something like a Christmas Santa or an Easter bunny for photo opportunities. Now, for each of these attractions, the nice thing is that you likely won't have to dedicate a considerable amount of space for each one to be effective. I'd recommend having a few chairs, maybe a table for each of these activities, as they require seating to conduct in most of these situations. You also want to just be sure that there's an electrical hookup and a trash receptacle at each of these booths because they tend to require both in order to operate successfully. So again, all of these are kind of handled in that similar manner. They don't take up a lot of space, and you want to give them electrical access, maybe some chairs, and a trash receptacle. So that'll kind of just get them started in a great manner. Now, when it comes to attracting these for your show, generally a lot of these are fairly easy to acquire. So again, Facebook posts, maybe a Google search, things like that. But a lot of times people kind of know somebody that does these types of things. So just keep that in mind that, if you're interested in having something like this at your show, it's generally not too hard to make this happen. And a big benefit is that this doesn't really require any kind of heads up or communication with the facility in most cases, because a lot of these are just, treated as a regular booth. Maybe there's something special happening at the booth, but, you don't really have to run this by a facility manager in most cases. Okay, now when it comes to payment, both in the regard for how they make money during the show and then how they're compensated by you perhaps as the organizer, let's kind of just dive into that. So for most of these types of vendors, they'll have a tip jar at their booth. Okay, so a lot of times what they'll do is they'll charge some sort of base fee. Let's take the caricature artist, for example. A lot of times it's like per person. So if they have like 3 people, they'll charge maybe like $20 per person to be on a caricature portrait. Okay, so they'll have some sort of base fee and then they'll have a tip jar out just to try to get some extra funds made during the event. Now, when it comes to you securing them to be part of their show, there's some wiggle room here. Okay, so sometimes there's flexibility on how this works. What some organizers will do is basically offer them a free booth so they don't have to pay for a booth. And in doing that, you're able to market them as an additional activity or a featured entertainment option at your show. Okay, so there's kind of like a win-win situation there. You can advertise your show in a greater manner to hopefully attract a bigger audience, and they're getting the free booth out of it and basically able to start making profits immediately. So this is a really nice way to do this as an organizer. I would highly recommend doing it this way. We did it this way, and the vendors really seemed to enjoy it, and it worked well for us. We didn't really have to make a big dedication, and all that we really had to sacrifice was what we'd earn with one booth fee, so not really a big deal. Now, you can consider charging for a booth fee, but that's up to you, so it's up to you as the organizer whether you have like a certain fee for these additional activities, or if you just decide that to charge them the booth fee that everybody else pays. A spot is a spot, and it's kind of uniform across the board. So there's several different ways that you can handle this, and it's up to you to figure out what works best. Sometimes by region, this could differ. So maybe there's already kind of like a standard way of doing this in your area. You could maybe reach out to other organizers, see what they do. But again, what we did was just give them a free booth and advertise them as a featured activity at the show. All right, so this next additional activity requires quite a bit of explaining. I'm going to walk you through verbally a few things. I'm actually going to hop on the computer in a moment and show you how to do some of this. So what we're going to be discussing here is event raffles and silent auctions. So the first thing that I want to kind of define for you is what a donation request is. So when you're getting ready to hold an event raffle or a silent auction, the first thing that you think of is, okay, I need items for this. I need things for people to bid on. So a donation request is a way for an event organizer to reach out to local companies or attractions in your area and request items that can be bid on for your auction. So that's a donation request. And there's pretty much one of two ways that this can be handled. The first is that the auction benefits and the raffle benefits your event. So basically, you're pocketing it as profits. We preferred not to go that route. Instead, what we like to do is use a raffle that can benefit a local charity or foundation. And it was essentially a fundraiser, okay? And it was a great aspect of the event because people could come, and not only were they getting a craft fair, but they could feel good about, contributing to something that was helping a local cause or foundation. So this was a nice tie-in to the event. So that's kind of the route that we chose for our donation requests, because a lot of times when you reach out to companies for a donation, they need to know what the purpose of the prizes are. Okay, so they need to know how their item is being used. So this is an element that you want to start planning as soon as possible, basically as soon as your event is booked, because the earlier that you do this, the less stress that these activities will be on you leading up to the event. So it's much easier to have this basically all planned out and laid out in advance so that you're not stressing about it right before the show. Another reason why, again, you want to do this as early as possible is that this can be a huge way to draw interest in your event before it happens. Okay, so leading up to the event, it's a great, great marketing tool to have. Okay, now just a quick couple of tips on an event raffle, a silent auction, is that you want to be clear that the winners must be present in order to win unless you're willing to ship the items. So you have to make that distinction known in advance so that people know what that situation is. You're also going to have to dedicate a little bit of manpower in order to make this happen. Not only, like I said, the hours it's going to take to plan this leading up to the show, but during the event, you're going to have at least one person in place all day at this booth, as you, the organizer, are going to be occupied with other things, such as visiting the vendors and checking in on them. So now that we talked about a couple of quick tips on, things to think about, I'm going to go ahead and show you exactly how to fill out donation requests so that you can start to get items for your event raffle or your silent auction. Okay, so the first thing that you want to do is hop onto Google and begin with a Google search on the topic that you would like to look for in a donation request. Okay, so let's just say, for example, you type in Green Bay Packers donation request, and you go there. And then right away, you're going to see something, community relations or something like that. You can click on this first one, and it's going to tell you all about the process and how it works. So, what type of event is eligible, the purpose of the event, things that they're going to require in order for them to even consider providing an item for donation. And then now again, one of the first things that you see here is that requests submitted less than 6 weeks in advance of the event date are not going to be accepted. Okay, so this is why it's very important to, if you're going to have an event raffle or a silent auction, that you have to get started on this very, very early, because a lot of these foundations and companies are going to need as much advance as possible. But basically, it just boils down to looking for the companies or the entertainment options in your area that you're interested in, and reading their terms and conditions. Usually they're not too daunting to look through, but you have to read everything just to make sure you know what you're getting into. There's usually an application process, so you'll fill out like a little application or a little form and submit it. Generally, they get back to you fairly quickly, we've noticed in the past. So it's not going to take too long. But what I would recommend doing is keeping a spreadsheet for yourself that you can keep track of all the donation requests that you've sent out, when you sent them, and then when you've heard back, either you've been approved or not approved. Okay, so I want to give you an idea of how we operated this and how we kept track of everything, because this can be one of those things that you plan for a craft fair that can get a little bit hard to keep track of. Okay, so we kept a spreadsheet with the events that corresponded with any kind of donation request. And I think it's important to keep a spreadsheet because if you plan craft fairs in different cities or areas, well, you might have different donation requests that you make based on those specific areas. Okay, so one might not fit for the other. So that's kind of how we kept track of this, is by the activity and by the region. And then we would put requests in for that particular area. So just for example, you can see down here is this activity, and we didn't request for this event or this event, but for this final event, that's the one that we put the request in for because it was held in that particular city. Okay, so this is a good way to keep track of all this as you start to make donation requests. I would highly recommend that you do something similar to this. You can outright use this template or just create one of your own. So again, just a reminder, as soon as you book the event, this is something that if you decide that you're going to have a raffle or an auction, you want to begin very quickly after you have secured the event and made it official, because the sooner you get started, the less stress it'll be down the road. Okay, so that sums up the basics for event raffles and silent auctions. Now, if you do have a comment or a question, please post it below in the comment section and we can keep the conversation going. This is one of those topics where I could probably spend an hour or two just on this topic alone. But to keep things moving, let's go ahead and move on with the next activity. All right, so the next thing that we're going to talk about is craft workshops. Similar to all the activities mentioned above, a craft workshop can be a tremendous asset to your event. However, these tend to require more space, and you'll also need to find someone who will be able to host these workshops at scheduled times throughout the day. So pretty typical for craft workshops to be scheduled in regular intervals. A lot of times you'll see it like, every hour, and maybe it's like a 15-20 minute workshop, or every other hour if it's something longer, like a 30 or 45-minute workshop. So when selecting the placement of the workshop, just remember that in addition to the guests participating in the workshop, this activity is also likely to attract a crowd, which that can potentially block aisles and foot traffic. Be sure that the placement of this activity makes sense in your layout, both during the workshop's scheduled times and during its downtime between demonstrations. Now, similar to the activities mentioned earlier, you and the workshop vendor should come to an agreement on their booth fee, what you'll charge for them to be part of the event if you charge them anything, how they're going to earn profits during the show. So it's nice to kind of get like a plan of activities so that you can use this as marketing, but then also get their fees during this, okay, so that you can give people a heads up. Also, if they're going to have a tip bucket, that's always kind of nice to be able to put on the marketing materials as well, so you can kind of help the vendor out a little bit. And any electrical requirements or other basic essentials that they'll need for their setup at your show. Now, another additional activity that can really enhance your event is an event photographer. So, hiring an event photographer at your show is a great way to take your event to the next level. It's going to provide you with great marketing shots for future use and installments of your event. And it's going to give your event a professional appearance. Okay. So being able to reuse these shots from year to year, maybe like some good crowd shots and like overall shots of the entire event, those are tremendously valuable to an event organizer to give your show a professional appearance. Discuss with your photographer if they are most comfortable drafting their own event photography release form or if you should draft one together. Now, an event photography release form is basically just a piece of paper saying, anybody that enters the event is subject to photography, and it's basically a condition of being on site. Okay, so it's basically just a waiver form in order for you to use these photos that will include members of the public. So even if you keep it as simple as something like having a sign posted at the entrance of your event stating that the event is being photographed and that attendees have the potential of being photographed at the show, so it could be something as simple as that. Feel free to add a sentence also that informs guests that photos containing visitors will never be sold or misused in any manner and are taken for event marketing purposes only. So if you want to add that sentence in, that can just add a layer of comfort if people get a little bit weirded out by that first statement. That can, basically just add some peace of mind. Now, many photographers sell photographs as their work, like their main job or a side gig. One way that you can compensate them for your efforts is, again, by offering them a free booth at your show while they work your event. Typically, they'll have a friend or sometimes an assistant that operates the booth while they're walking around and capturing your show. Sometimes an event photographer will be willing to work with your vendors to offer product, booth, or brand photography during your event. This can be mutually beneficial to the photographer as well as your vendors. You, as the organizer, can make a lasting impression on all parties if you can make this service possible as part of your event. So this can be a really, really nice drawing point in for vendors. And sometimes vendors, they don't have professional photos of their goods, and being able to acquire this during your show is such a nice perk to offer your vendors. So this is a big reason why you want to consider an event photographer, not only just for your own marketing aspects, but for your vendors being able to acquire their own, marketing photographs. So definitely consider this as part of your show, and I think it's a win-win all around for everybody. So these are a bunch of additional activities that you can have at your event. Now, there's probably some out there that I didn't cover, but I hope that this kind of gives you an idea of how to acquire them, maybe how to communicate with them, how you can actually negotiate their placement at the show. So, what will they be paid and how will they earn income at your show? And then how it's going to benefit your event. Maybe the different ways that you can attract guests that you might not have if you didn't have these additional activities and it was just a craft fair. Okay, so just consider these as part of your show. It can really take things to the next level and make it more of almost like a festival-like atmosphere. And that can be a lot of fun for your guests. So as your events grow, these are some of the things that you can introduce in order to take it to the next level. This was episode 9 in the How to Become a Craft Fair Organizer series. I want to thank you all so much for joining me on this journey so far. We're approaching the halfway point, so we've got a long way to go still, but we're kind of getting into the more fun things that we can talk about with actually planning the event. So I hope that you've liked it so far. If you have, please consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel, and sharing it with your friends. To check out all the other videos in the How to Become a Craft Fair Organizer playlist, click on this playlist above, and thank you all so much for watching. Have a great day.